Today, from the Board of Advanced Studies and Research of the Institute of Cost Accountants of India, we have organized a webinar on internal audit for compliance and regulatory requirements. This webinar basically will be for the general awareness for our members. And today we have CMA Vinod Krishnan Panikkar sir as our speaker. And we would like to introduce sir before starting of the session. Sir is a CMA, CA, MBA, CIA, MS, CCSA, and CGAP. His professional experience includes 30 years in internal audit, risk management, internal controls, establishing internal audit department, and managing accounts and finance department. He had worked experience spanning both industry and the consulting profession. He has involved in audits of various companies covering industries like FMCG, electricity, energy, education institution, automobile ancillary, hotels, hospital, jewelry, retail, real estate, and manufacturing. Sir's qualification is, as I had mentioned, he is a fellow member of the Institute of Cost Accountants of India and a fellow member of Chartered Accountants of India also. He has done his MBA on International Business from IFT. He is a certified government auditing professional USA. He has certification in control self-assessment USA. He is a certified internal auditor USA CIA. He's completed his Master of Science in Consultancy Management from BITS Pilani. Currently, sir is working in SSKM as a consultancy firm as Associate Director. Previously, he has worked in Dharampal Satyapal Limited as General Manager Internal Audit, Malabar Developers Private Limited as a General Manager Finance and Accounts, Unitech Limited Additional General Manager Internal Audit, in India Bulls Power Limited as Assistant General Manager Internal Audit. He was in Deloitte Haskins and Sells as an Audit Manager Internal Audit Practice. He was in R. Khattar Associates as a Partner Internal Audit. He was in DLF Universal Limited as Assistant Manager Internal Audit. So we believe that today's session with sir will be very enriching for us and all of the participants. And so without wasting any more time, I would like to hand over the session to sir. Sir, please continue with the session.
Thank you, ma'am, for such a wonderful, presentation briefing about me. Thank you, ma'am. My fellow post accountant, good afternoon to all. And it's really wonderful seeing all the fellow post accountants taking interest in internal audit profession. And I was surprised when ma'am told me that more than 190 members joined. It's a very good field, very remunerative, and there are a lot of learning which you can use in other part of profession also. So I start my presentation with this. First of all, let's discuss about the definition of internal audit. There are a lot of definition. All the institutes around the world have given the definition of internal audit, and there are other people also who like the definition given by Institute of Internal Auditors, US. It's a sole body who do a lot of research in internal auditing. So the definition is very simple, very objective, and very meaningful. I just verbatim, I'm reading that internal audit is an independent, objective assurance and consulting activity designed to add value and improve an organization's operations. It helps an organization accomplish its objective by bringing a systematic, disciplined approach to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of risk management, control, and governance process. Let's open this definition and try to find out the various words used in this definition. Let's expand this definition. So if we expand this, the definition we just read, that comes is what is internal auditing. Now, One of the word is independent and another is objective activity. So what is this? Internal auditing operates independently from other functions within the organization. That means the independence of this function is the utmost first thing. If you want unbiased and objective evaluation, then you need an independence. Second word, it comes as assurance and consulting. So assurance means provide confidence to the stakeholders that risks are managed effectively. Now, nowadays, this stakeholder is a wide definition. It's not only employer, employee, shareholders, government, local bodies, everything included in this definition of stakeholders. So it's a huge responsibility. Now, second is consulting. What internal audit as a consulting? It offers recommendation to improve process and operations. Now, another word comes is add value. So what internal auditor do is help organization achieve their objective by identifying inefficiency and risk. We will all discuss this in detail later on also. Throughout the presentation, a lot of these words will come: inefficiency, risk. Now, another word comes is systematic and disciplined approach. Means any profession which called to be a profession has to be systematic and disciplined approach. So systematic means is follow a structured methodology to evaluate and improve risk management. That is risk management. Again, we will later on we will define again. So risk management is identify and mitigate the risk. Now control process. Control process means ensure controls are effective and efficient. Another word or last word it comes as governance process, which today's context is a lot of importance is there. So it's strengthen oversight and accountability in the organization. So what is the key takeaway from this definition of internal audit is that internal audit is a strategic tool that support organization in achieving their goals and improve risk management, control and governance. Now, what is the role of internal auditor? The following are the role of internal auditor as required to be done by appointed internal auditor in an organization. So independent assessment. Now, what is independent assessment? That is an internal auditor thoroughly review a company's financial and operational process, risk management practice, and adhere to regulations. This independent perspective help identify potential weakness or area for improvement. Now we take a small pause and think about what is this risk management. Earlier also we talk about the risk. Now anything and everything happens in the company or around us, society, there are always a risk. When we talk about risk is one factor which is inherent. Whether we are walking, standing, working, this is a normal person's life. Risk is so much involved. Just see what all kind of risk involved in a company, because company is an artificial person as per the definition of Companies Act. So any activity in the company, there is a risk. And now risk is inherent. Now, first thing as an internal auditor, we have to identify what is the risk in a particular activity and process. Then we have to see whether we have a mitigating control, whether there is any control in that process which mitigate the risk. That means risk is inherent. Risk will always be there. Money risk can be in different degree. Maybe minor risk, major risk, medium risk, but risk will always be there. We cannot avoid the risk. Risk is always there. Now, how to mitigate that risk? For that, we need a control. So we have to identify risk, and then we have to identify whether there is any control in the process which mitigate that risk. So this is anything and everything as a role of an internal auditor. Now, second thing is we can again come back to this risk management. Another is reporting and recommendation. Now, auditors' findings are documented in audit report presented to the board or the audit committee. These reports gives valuable insight and suggestion for corrective action, ensuring appropriate follow through on identified issues. Issues comes because there are risks which are not properly mitigated by the existing control. There can weakness in the control, or we have overlooked some of the risks. So that comes in a reporting part. Another area is a fraud detection and prevention. Auditor has to play a crucial role in safeguarding the company's assets by detecting and preventing fraudulent activity. They investigate suspicious activity and assess internal control, recommend measures to strengthen anti-fraud mechanism. Again, internal control means wherever the word internal control comes, automatically we have to think that it's related to the risk, and risk, as we discussed earlier, that risk is inherent. So risk is always there. Now we have to see whether we have a control, whether we have an internal control which mitigate that risk. If it's not able to mitigate that risk properly, then there can be an incidence of fraud. So that is a red flag activity. Now another area is role of an internal auditor as financial accuracy and compliance. Now, internal auditor meticulously examine financial transactions and records. They verify accuracy, completeness, and adherence to accounting standards and regulatory requirement, help ensure that companies' financial statements are reliable and compliant. Now, one of the important thing we have to understand is where all this internal audit is applicable. As per Companies Act 2013. Now, this slide is, we have to understand it properly. If a paid up any company which is a listed company, internal audit is applicable. If it's an unlisted public company, then if paid up capital is more than 50 crores, then internal audit is applicable. If turnover of the company, unlisted company, is more than 200 crore, then also internal audit is applicable, even though the paid up capital is less than 50 crores. But if turnover is more than 200 crores, then it's applicable. If the turnover is more than 200 crores, then private company is also applicable for internal audit. If outstanding loans and borrowings from the bank or financial institution at any point during the preceding financial year is more than 100 crores, in both the cases, listed, unlisted and private company, both the cases, if outstanding borrowings are more than 100 crores, internal audit is applicable. Now another category is outstanding deposit at any point during the preceding financial year is more than 25 crores. Then in that case, unlisted company, internal audit is applicable. So an existing company covers any of the above criteria. Such compliance shall be required of section 138, and this rule within 6 months of commencement of section, that is, it's applicable from 1st April 2014 onward. Now, what is the scope and function of internal audit? As such, Companies Act recommended where all internal audit is applicable. never, recommended the scope of internal audit, nor there is any rule which prescribed. So audit committee of the company or board shall, in consultation with the internal auditor, formulate the scope, functioning, periodically and methodology for conducting the internal audit. It's sub rule 2 of rule 13 of Companies Act, uh, rule 2014. But as such, there is no scope or functioning of internal auditor has been described in Companies Act 2013, nor in any rule. Now, what are the qualifications of internal auditor? Who can be an internal auditor? Earlier, it was a lot of debate around this. But section Companies Act 2013, there are a lot of clarity comes. That as per section 138, which emphasized the internal auditor for the category of companies which we discussed earlier. A chartered accountant can be an internal auditor, means a cost accountant can be an internal auditor because cost accountant possesses expertise in internal cost management. A CIA can be a CIA from Institute of Internal Auditors, certified internal auditor can be a internal auditor. And apart from that, as per Rule 13, Company Accounts Rule 2014, company can appoint a qualified employee with relevant experience to serve as an internal auditor. So any employee who's qualified enough, it's not described what qualification, but a engineer or a HR professional, anybody who's have enough experience, company can appoint him or her as a internal auditor. Now, one of the important thing we have to remember in this is a statutory auditor cannot be an internal auditor. Earlier, both the functions can be done by the same audit firm. Now, a statutory auditor cannot be an internal auditor as per section 144B of the Companies Act 2013. Oh, again, how to appoint an internal auditor? Just from my experience, or normally companies follows this step to appoint an internal auditor. Means appoint a qualified internal auditor is crucial for any company, subject to the requirement of Companies Act 2013. Now, first we have to select a qualified candidate. Ensure that chosen candidate meet the eligibility criteria outlined in the Companies Act. Companies Act says if you are a qualified person, if you have enough experience, you are an internal candidate who have enough experience, can be an internal auditor. Then we have to obtain a written consent from the chosen individual or firm, confirming that they are willing to be appointed as an internal auditor. Is very important. Then we have to hold a board meeting, schedule a meeting with board of directors to discuss and formally approve the internal auditor's appointment. Then we have to create the documentation. Within 15 days of the board meeting, prepare a draft of comments made during the meeting regarding the appointment. Now, once this documentation is finalized, create a copy of the order issued by the board officially. Appoint a chosen individual as an internal auditor. Now, one of the important thing is generally people, companies appoint the internal auditor, but forget to file the form MGT 14, which is very important. Now, once you are required as per the Companies Act to appoint an internal auditor, you have to file within 30 days MGT 14 with Registrar of Companies within 30 days of the board meeting. This form mandate under Section 117 of the Companies Act formally notified the ROC of the internal auditor's appointment. And remember, one of the very important thing is we have to include the prescribed fees within this form. Then we have to issue a appointment letter, a formal appointment letter to newly appointed internal auditor, outlining their responsibility, terms of engagement, and any other relevant details. Now, penalty for non-compliance with internal audit. The Companies Act 2013 has no specific penalty for non-compliance with internal audits mandate under Section 138. But however, Section 450 applies in some cases. In such cases where internal auditor is not appointed, the company and any officer deemed responsible for non-compliance. That means not appointing an internal auditor, where as per the Companies Act, they have to compulsorily appoint an internal auditor. Then the initial penalty will be up to 10,000 rupees. Now, if non-compliance continues, then fine of 1,000 can be levied for every additional day. Now, this section 450 are compoundable. That means company can approach the relevant authority and pay the penalty and settle the case. They don't need to go to court. Now, what kind of work does internal audit do? Audit assurance activity. Yeah. So audit types include operational audit. It is a review of organization's usage of resources to ensure that those resources are being utilized efficiently and effectively as possible to accomplish a mission and goal. Like suppose you can do an audit of purchase department. Now, whether purchase department is functioning properly, whether we have purchased the goods at the cheapest available rate with maximum quality or best quality. Another is compliance audit. Now, in further, we will discuss compliance audit in detail because this is one of the topic for this webinar. Now, compliance audit is a performance to determine if an organization or program is operating in accordance with policy, procedure, laws, and regulations. We will, because this need little more time to discuss. So further, I will discuss this, and I will share some practical experience which we have gone through while establishing the compliance system. Last several years, 7-8 years, I was specifically devoted a lot of time in establishing the compliance system in the company. So we'll discuss that in detail. Now, another area is financial audit, most commonly known as form of audit, refers to systematic review of companies' financial reporting to ensure all information is valid as per accounting standards. Another is investigative audit. These are typically when management asks you to review any or investigate if there is any violation of rule, regulations, laws. So that is covered in investigative audit. What kind of work does internal auditor do? It's a consulting activity, as we discussed earlier in the definition of IA internal audit. That is an advisory activity and generally performed at the specific request of an engagement client or a management. The nature and scope of the consulting engagement again, has to be predetermined before taking this assignment. An internal auditor has to maintain an objective and not assume management responsibility. See this, when suppose we were asked to review the onboarding vendors. It's a very tricky activity. Sometimes we cross the objective of the audit or the mandate given to us, and we started investigating in those areas or step into those areas which sometimes beyond the objective of that audit, like do a lot of technical analysis of the vendor's capability. That's why we have to maintain an objectivity in this kind of consulting activity. Suppose any HR related consulting. Now we have to see where, what kind of mandate and whether we have that skill set or not. So this is specifically a management required activity where we assist on specific projects, provide feedback or advise on internal control and risk, investigate fraud and other allegations on management request. Now, one of the very very popular area where internal auditor do a lot of work is the IFC testing, as a pre-IFC testing or ICOFR testing before stat auditor comes. No, in this activity is always requested by management to have a comfort that whether the IFC document or ICOFR document is current, live, and actually followed by the employees or by the function. This this is a very from the, as I mentioned earlier, that IAA is a research organization relating to internal auditor and internal audit profession, and they come up with a 3-line model. You get a lot of documents, commentary on this, and I request you to go through those commentaries. It actually enlighten you and broaden your thinking and your perspective regarding internal audit. So that 3-line model is a first line, second line, and the third line. Now, as an internal auditor, I am sitting at a third line. Now we have to understand the key role in the 3-line model organization. This model, and we have to decipher this. That at the top level, governing body is we can say board of directors, promoters. Below them, there can be MD. Sometimes MD is from the promoter side, so we will take them as a part of a governing body. But otherwise, all the employees. If a MD is an employee, that means is an employee, then he comes under management. So for the simplicity, we say promoters are governing body, and below the promoters, all the management are management. So the role of the governing body is to accept accountability to stakeholders for oversight of the organization. They have to engage with stakeholders. As I defined earlier, stakeholders is a very wide term. So engage with stakeholders to monitor their interest and communicate transparency on the achievement of objective. Even the people who are staying around your organization or your company, whether you are doing any water pollution or environmental pollution, so they are stakeholders. So governing body has to see their interests also. So nurture a culture promoting ethical behavior and accountability within the company. That is the role of a governing body. Establish structure and process for governance, including ancillary committee as required, like CSR committee, like environmental committee. Governing body's responsibility is to delegate responsibility and provide resources to the management for achieving the objective of the organization. So all kind of resources that again governing body's responsibility to provide. Now another role is determine organizational appetite for risk and exercise oversight of risk management, including internal control. Again, what we discussed earlier regarding the risk management, all that has to, from top down, from the top, that means governing body, they have to establish that environment of internal control from the top going down to the bottom. Another role is maintaining oversight of compliance with legal, regulatory and ethical expectation. Again, if the managing body or governing body, promoters, if they behave ethically, they behave legally, then down below all the employees will behave accordingly, and company as a overall as a uh, as a person, as an artificial person, also behave within that regulatory and legal requirement. Another important role of the governing body is to establish and oversee an independent, objective and competent internal audit function. See, one of the definition earlier we discussed it. Internal audit should be an independent function. So again, governing body can only maintain and establish that independence of the internal auditor. If internal audit department is not independent, that entire activity goes on toss. Now we talk about first line. The first line is a management role, which includes lead and direct action, include managing risk and application of resources to achieve the objective of the organization. The example I have given for purchase department, whatever resource, within the resource we have to purchase the best quality product at the cheapest available rate. Then maintain a continuous dialogue with the governing body and report on planned, actual and expected outcome linked to the objective of organization and risk. That means management has to continuously feed the governing body that what is happening day to day, what is the target was, what was the target, where we are now, how much we achieved. Another role is establish and maintain appropriate structure and processes for the management of operations and risk. Now what kind of structure, organization chart or org chart, which we say, that is the responsibility of management to establish that there should be a proper organizational structure. There should be a proper authority matrix, responsibility matrix, delegation of authority and all. That is the responsibility of the management. That all comes in first line. And another thing is ensure compliance with legal, regulatory and ethical expectation. See, governing body has to ensure that they follow all the ethical practices, but and the mandate they have to give to the management that company has to ensure the compliance with legal, regulatory and ethical expectation. Now, the ensure and bring the mandate of the governing body into action is the role of the management. Now, this is the first line. Now, second line is provide a complementary expertise, support monitoring and challenges related to management of risk. Now, as we discussed earlier, that risk is inherent. So for that, we have to see whether whether there is properly defined SOP is there and proper testing of risk and control is happening. Risk and control matrix is prepared, distributed, make available to all the employees for them to understand that in their particular process, what kind of risk is there, what kind of control is there to mitigate that risk, and whether they are in the function during the working, they are taking care that the prescribed control is actually following. So this is the development, implementation and continuous improvement of risk management practice, including internal control at the process, system and entity level. Again, you can control this only through risk management. This entire practice of risk management is through RCM, risk control matrix. So if any of you have seen the RCM, in the RCM there is a risk is defined, then there is a control is defined, then there is a activity is defined, that process activity is defined, then the person who's responsible for this particular activity is defined. So that kind of document is required to have the control. Another objective is to achieve the risk management objectives such as compliance with laws, regulations, and acceptable ethical behavior, internal control, information security, sustainability, and quality assurance. Another area comes under the second line is provide analysis and report on the accuracy and effectiveness of risk management, again, which includes internal control. So wherever the risk management comes, risk can only be managed through control. Now the third line of activity is, or third line of in the model, third line is the internal audit. Now internal audit, as we discussed earlier, that's this independent assurance. So it's what internal audit do is maintain a preliminary accountability to managing governing body and independence from the responsibility of the management. Another role is to communicate independent and objective assurance and advice to the management and the governing body on the adequacy and effectiveness of the governance and risk control, which is through support to achieve the organization objective and promote the and facilitate the continuous improvement. If they find any anomalies, they have to report impairment to independence and objective to the governing body and implement safeguard as required. So through their internal audit report, they have to bring out the control weaknesses and the suggestions through which they can the particular risk can be mitigated or control can be improved. Another area is the external assurance provider. It provides additional assurance to satisfy the legislative and regulatory expectations that serve to protect the interests of the stakeholders as listed companies or as per the requirement. We earlier discussed that internal audit is mandatory for certain kind of companies. So the internal audit report and their assurance is a additional safeguard which serve the expectations of the stakeholders. The role of the internal audit is to satisfy the request of management and the governing body to complement internal audit of assurance. Now, as our main topic was related to compliance and regulation, we have to understand what is the little difference. There is a little difference between internal audit and a compliance audit. So internal audit is independent of management, whereas compliance function is a component of a management, because compliance environment has to come from the top management, that is governance. A governance activity or a compliance activity can be successful if top management or governing body or promoters take interest in that. So the difference is internal audit is evaluate the control structure, whereas in compliance function or compliance audit, is a part of a control structure. Now in internal audit, we evaluate the internal control environment as its adequacy, efficiency and effectiveness, whereas in compliance the objective is different. Ensure that company comply with all the applicable laws, rules, regulations, as well as internal code of conduct, policy and procedures. So here one thing we have to understand is the compliance per se, the entire compliance. When I talk about, we have to take the external compliance requirement and the internal compliance requirement, that company's own rules, regulations, like company says only Saturday or Friday you can wear casual. All the other days you have to come in formal. Suppose that is part of a internal compliance, so you have to follow that. Again, external compliance can be your water pollution level or how you discharge the polluted water. That all comes under the external laws. A compliance area broadly, if I discuss that direct tax compliance, which is, there can be a possible risk. What can be the possible risk in direct tax compliance? Imposition of penalty, prosecution of directors, loss of reputation. So, in a nutshell, as a internal auditor or as an auditor, when I see the compliance, I have to see what are the risk of non-compliance. So indirect tax, again, cancellation of license, withdrawal of tax benefit, stoppage of operations, loss of reputation. Now, if labor law is not complied, then imposition of penalty, prosecution of directors, loss of reputation, employees dissatisfaction. Now, environmental health and safety laws, stoppage of operation, loss of reputation, imposition of penalty. And company law compliance, imposition of penalty, vacation, prosecution of directors, senior management, loss of reputation. Now we talk about how compliance framework. As per the definition, a compliance framework is a structured set of guidelines, control, and practices that help organization meet regulatory requirement and achieve business objective. Now, another thing in the framework is the key component, that is guidelines, policy, procedure that define how to comply with the regulations. Control is a mechanism to ensure compliance. That means audit, monitoring system and all. Practices, daily activity and processes that align with compliance goals. Now, what is the purpose? To ensure that organization avoid legal penalties and maintain reputation, help in managing risk and improving operational efficiency. Now we can take an example like compliance of data protection laws, ICFR, IFC, these environmental regulations, that all comes under this compliance framework. Now, what is the key takeaway from this slide? Is a compliance framework is essential for organization to meet legal objectives, manage risk, and achieve business goals effectively. Once we have this document, that means the meaning of that is that we have a documented framework how to comply with the regulatory requirement or internal compliance requirement. This compliance framework can be further understood by compliance policy. Compliance policy says what comes under that: rules and SOPs, requirement and review. Now, a compliance policy outlines key objective, goals and approaches you want to implement in your organization, or sometimes it's an obligation which you include in your framework. Compliance policy, what it do is it helps establish adherence to benchmark, serve as a guideline tool for implementation, and set a cultural security and accountability within the organization. Once these are all documented, anyone can read and anyone and everyone can understand that what is the requirement for complying with internal or external rules and regulations. The typical compliance policy, if I can say, is it talks about the roles and responsibilities of the employees. What employees are assigned activities along with expected delivery date, like 7th very common is TDS we have to deposit. So the person who's responsible for that, the expectation from the management is that before 7th, the TDS has to be deposited. Yeah. Now governing requirement, the clause or subclause of regulation applicable for each activity that we have to understand. Now, SOP is very important. Once we document this, it's a set of process to identify new compliance requirement and implement relevant technology to meet those obligations and monitor and incorporate all the controls. We will discuss that later on for technology part. That SOP is one part. SOP defines and technology helps in implementing that SOP. We will discuss in detail later on. Now, monitoring and reporting mechanism method to continuously audit and evaluate the effectiveness of compliance activity. Again, through tools, we can do that. Management review is a set of frequency of management oversight and review of process. This also we will discuss again. Now, communication of updates. Now, process and frequency of policy revision and communication channel for notifying the updates. In our country, frequently laws changes or keep on adding. Now, how we control that? How we update that in our SOPs or in our tool, which we'll later discuss on. Then only we can, we even our intention is to, follow all the rules and regulations. But if we don't know a particular subclause comes, which has a particular requirement which we haven't fulfilled because we don't know. So how to keep that update, which is a very, very, important thing. Another second, the part of the compliance framework is the compliance plan. When a compliance policy sets the tone of the framework implementation, which we discussed, that tone has to come from the management, that is governing body. A compliance plan is has to be more comprehensive and structured blueprint. The plan is supposed to address the risk associated with each compliance. The risk is, if in case of non-compliance, what is the penalty? Like we have discussed, in case of non-compliance, there can be imprisonment, discontinuation of the work, management can be apprehended, jail and all. So that risk associated with each compliance area, then resources and budgeting and training of employees and documentation of strategies, how to implement that. Now, when we talk about the compliance plan, is the type, complexity and objective of the control. We have to discuss that. Now, how achievable are your control metrics and how well they align with the policy and process. Again, through RCM only we can do this, because RCM document all the risk and mitigating controls. So there should be a clear alignment between selected control and framework requirement. Third part of the framework is the compliance automation. This automation means a tool. We have identified the compliance, we have documented the compliance, but how we will implement that? If we have a tool, if we can make it automate, if we can automate that, that's the best thing, which make our life easy and is within seconds we know the status of the control. Now, compliance automation is a set of use of technological solutions to streamline compliance process. Like we can use the spreadsheet, calendar, task-based accountability. Yeah. So this we can do. Compliance automation tools, it helps to regulatory mapping of all the applicable laws. It integrates risk assessment tool, automate the process of identifying and evaluating risk, as well as initiating corrective options, then streamline the flow. It helps in policy management, then training is required, then continuous monitoring. The last is the independent audit, where we as an internal auditor comes, we review the control against the required framework policy. It helps management to understand where the minor gap or major non-compliance lies so that it can be fixed and avoid legal issues and ensure business continuity. So generally, audits are performed by independent bodies because then it leaves no room for biased view. Once complete, the auditor will guide you with a detailed report, and report contains gaps, suggestions, corrective actions, and compliance with other useful observations. Now, this I know that this is practically very difficult to implement. Now, last 7-8 years of struggle, we came up with a solution that how to practically we can have a robust compliance and regulatory environment or control or follow up in our organization. So what we have done is, first, by internal resource or external resource, we have to identify, first thing is all the applicable laws in my organization. Now, some of the acts you actually come to surprise that suppose you have a factory in remote area where which is within 100 meters of a national monument. You don't even know that. So if you try to do some kind of erection, some kind of construction, that is a violation of the that National Monument Act. Just an example. So it's very important. First thing is to identify all the applicable laws. Then second thing is we have to identify the applicability of that act on our organization. Third thing is identify the person who act as a compliance officer. When I say compliance officer, means the person who is solely responsible for the compliance of that act or that activity. Say we discussed about TDS. Now, compliance officer for TDS is just an example, is your tax head. So tax head is a responsible person, that is a compliance officer. Any non-compliance related to TDS or that matter, income tax, that tax head is responsible. Now, who is the compliance owner? Compliance owner is that account officer or account manager who is actually responsible for depositing that TDS. Now, this compliance owner is reporting to the compliance officer. Now, last thing is the chief compliance officer. Now, suppose typically a 50 to 80 acts generally applicable on any company. Now, if how to control that? If we have 80, suppose 80 laws, for 80 laws, we have 80 compliance officers. Under one compliance officer, we can have 2 or 3 or 4 compliance owners. Like if we take about, if I take an example of direct tax, one person is responsible for TDS, another tax person is responsible for direct advanced tax, another is filing of tax audit and all. So 3-4 people become a compliance owner. He reports to one compliance officer. Now, if all the compliance officers can report to management, it become a very tedious work. So what we do is we have to identify one person who acts as a chief compliance officer. Now, how this entire system works is compliance owner every month or quarterly frequency you can decide, give a certificate to the compliance officer. Like suppose if we take an example of TDS, the person who deposited the TDS, he gave a certificate or a mail or any format which we for the time being taking as a certificate to the compliance officer who is the tax head, that I have deposited the TDS for this month within the required time. Now, all the compliance officers in the company get this kind of certificate from their respective compliance owners. Now, all these compliance officers, when they receive the certificate from their compliance owners, they issue a certificate to the chief compliance officer. When chief compliance officer gets all the certificate, so based on those certificates, he or she give one certificate to the board that in the company for that particular period, entire compliance is taken care. We have followed what is required as per the law. Legally, we have complied. And if there is any non-compliance, that report as an exception report, he will give separately, or he or she will give separately. Now, how to do this? Because once you make a person compliance officer, it's not necessary that he will, follow that. So what we have to do is we have to pass a board resolution approved from the board of directors that this particular person is a compliance officer and for this particular act, and they all report to one person as a chief compliance officer. Once we have that document, that board resolution in place, that means that entire identification of the person become official. Now the last stage is we have to identify a tool. There are a lot of tools available in the market which make this compliance automatic. Like what it tools work is it identifies the particular requirement of the act. Like for income tax, the TDS has to be deposited within 7th. So before 7th, one mail trigger to the account officer that your TDS is due. You have to deposit. He deposit the TDS, then he mention or upload that proof to the proof in the compliance tool. This compliance proof goes to the compliance officer. He opens that, certify that, approves that, then a compliance certificate is automatically generated and it goes to the chief compliance officer. So this way, this entire function works. Now this is my last slide. Actually, this entire thing has to discuss in detail. It requires 4-5 hours. So I don't know how much I able to complete that, but we can discuss anytime. If anyone have any query, they can contact me anytime. Apart from that, I like to share one thing that Institute of that our institute, Cost Accounting Institute, has a advanced study module of internal audit. It's a 4-module based course. It generally requires 50 hours, and within 3 months you can complete this course, and I will present that course to you, and you will find out that it's a beautifully prepared course. The contents are very good, and it has all the requirement which you need to be a good internal auditor. So it's my privilege that I get the opportunity from the ICMI Institute to present this course to you, the syllabus of the course. So it gives a lot of theoretical and practical knowledge, which comes with overview of the internal auditing, importance of internal auditing in the organization, and key objectives of assurance and consulting services. In the module 1, the institute covers introduction and overview. So this module covers the Fundamentals of the internal auditing includes its history, objective, scope. It explores various type of audits such as operational and compliance audit and the role of internal auditor in providing assurance and consulting services. As we all discussed, what we discussed within an hour is just a gist or just a headline. When you do this course of a 3 month is practically a 50-hour course, and it's this much time actually is required if we want to understand internal audit in and want to create a or make a career in an internal audit. I think 50 hours is required. So key topics includes internal auditing standards, laws and regulations, internal audit charter. Again, we are not able to discuss this because and control testing, what I discussed about IFC and ICOFR testing. This is the way, currently there are a lot of demand in this area, and most of the companies, they want pre-review of the IFC or ICOFR before stat auditor comes. So very good area. And in module 2, we covers planning and execution. There is a focus on audit execution. This means we are talking about a lot of practical approach here, that internal auditing, planning, methodology, engagement, management. We have to understand what is internal audit plan, what is internal audit program, how to implement that, how to scoping the internal audit. It's differentiate between outsourced auditor, in-house auditor, covering engagement documents, sampling technique, very important. If our samples are not proper, then we miss out a lot of things, and our report will not be the presentation of what is in the population. So very important. Then practical aspect, such as how to face audit committee, how to communicate in the audit committee, how to do the progress monitoring. That means after we issue the report, what are the action taken on that report. Then most important thing is the documentation. We cover in this course, working paper documentation is very, very important. If tomorrow something happens, some fraud investigation and all by the government comes, so they also investigate internal audit, and they discuss all this with the internal auditor, and they will first thing they will ask you is the internal audit report and the associate documentation, working paper. So it's very, very relevant, and we do some case studies also, very relevant case studies, which actually gives you a lot of practical insight. Third module is skills and techniques. This module emphasizes a lot on technical and professional skills for effective auditing. So topics like understanding business process, efficiency in audit tools, data analytics. There are a lot of auditing tools, data analytical tools are there. Then risk assessment technique, very important. If one thing we have to understand in internal audit is that is risk and control. So we will get a lot of practical insight into risk management, risk assessment technique. Interpersonal and communication skill, very, very important. See, in internal auditor has to be a best communicator. His interpersonal skill should be excellent, because every time you deal with the person first, data later. See, everything an internal auditor do is internal auditing means listening. So a internal auditor has to be very good listener. It's not like any other audit like stat audit and all, or compliance audit. Internal auditor means you have to sit with the auditee, understand his process. Even though all the documentation is required SOPs there, you can read through the SOP, but you can't be a good auditor until you read the SOP and then you sit with the auditee and understand how he or she do that work, how much she follows the SOP, how much they do their own. Because we as a human being, when we do work, after sometimes we indulge in work so much that we start doing things in our own way. So to understand that interpersonal and communication skill is very, very important. Then technology integration in audit. So how to use the audit tool, how we can write a report, how we can conclude a audit. Very, very important. Otherwise, open-ended scope is there, and you keep on doing the audit. You you exceed the time required, and then you at the end you incur loss. Then in the fourth module, which is an industry specific application, what we do is this final module is focused on industry specific application of internal audit, where it covers risk based auditing, enterprise risk management, then corporate governance, financial management, IT security, and compliance with statutory regulations. Additionally, it also addresses the internal audit process across various business functions. So that means we cover 7, 8 functions like operations, inventory, management, sales, HR, finance. Yeah, and we supplement all this with real world case studies. So this course is very, very interactive, and it actually helps you to be a good internal auditor. Conclusion is that internal audit enhances governance, risk, and compliance. It's a structured approach to ensure comprehensive understanding, and this course, there can be a lot of practical applicability in this course. So thank you all. I haven't, see any, any kind of notes or any kind of chat or any remarks. So if you have, if you want to ask any question, it's a Q&A or yeah,
sir,
please, ma'am.
CMA Dakshish H. Javedi, he asked that what about internal audit of cost records? What can be the scope under internal audit of cost records, as this is for the purpose from compliance point of view, wherein cost auditor has to comment in his main certificate about the same. You can find all the questions in the question answer section, sir.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. If you can read it out by your own, I think it will be helpful for you.
Okay, that may be in.
It is in the Q&A section.
Okay. Q&A. Okay, yeah.
Did you receive it, sir? Did you
Yeah, I'm opening that. It's opening actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you see it, sir, or
Yes.
should I read it out?
Yeah, no, it's okay.
Okay.
55 is there. So mostly is between internal audit and forensic audit, which is the predator. See, both are different. Internal audit is different. Forensic audit is different. Forensic audit, internal. See, when we do the internal audit, sometimes we get some red flags. Based on that red flag, we suggest management for going for a forensic audit. Like if we take the example of the purchase function, if we find some kind of irregularities in payment, or there are duplicate payment, or same person with name, different address, same address, different person, split of suppose up to 10,000 rupees we can make a purchase without quotation. So and we found some splitting of the PO, splitting of the bill and all. So that trigger for the forensic audit. So once we get some kind of evidence or some kind of red flag, then we go for the forensic audit. I hope that I able to satisfy you. Voice is not clear. Some decos. Please, CMA Dilip. Please deal with internal audit of cost records. Frankly, I have never done this. Internal audit of cost records. I don't know. I'm from internal audit fraternity, and we know a lot of people in India. So I never come across this, this kind of, audit of cost records. Maybe sometimes, we take some data for to as a additional control. We take cost records, but never done the audit of a cost record. It's a cost record sometimes work as a substitute, a secondary evidence. Yeah, a cost auditor can be appointed as an internal auditor. Only stat auditor cannot be appointed as an internal auditor. So Usha has asked this question. Yeah, cost auditor can be appointed as an internal auditor. As far as I know, there is no restriction legally. What about internal control of cost records? What can be the scope under internal audit of cost records? So I never come across any incidents where anybody has done internal audit of a cost records. Cost records, my understanding is we use sometimes as a supplementary evidence. Hi sir, Somnath. Whether these requirements are necessary, even if there is a separate department of internal audit with HOD at company like board approval to appoint him or as a see. What generally company do is they have an internal audit department. Even if we have an internal audit department, we have to appoint one person as a internal auditor of the company, and we have to file MJT 14. That is a requirement. Most of the companies don't follow, but that is a requirement you have to do. You have to file you first through the board resolution. You appoint a person as an internal auditor of the company and file MGT 14 within 30 days. That is the requirement. Generally, companies don't follow that, but it's required. Yeah, Dakshesh, can our queries be answered? Yeah, definitely. See, IA course is not necessary as I did present in my presentation that even a cost accountant can be an internal auditor. If you see the tenders of the government department or public sector, you will find the essential qualification is CA, ICAA, ICMA and all. So you don't need to be a IA, CIA. A.K. Ramesh. In practice, the internal audit scope of work is discussed with management in advance and then execute. From your experience, please share any instance where management has avoided critical area from scope of work to expose its weakness. It happens. Sometimes management is not comfortable, or sometimes management themselves know that there is some problem in that area. They are working on that, and they ask for some time. They will say that next year you will do. By the time we will improve this. Or sometimes some business heads upfront they will say that this is a painful area. We are working on that. These several points we identified as a weakness, and we are working on that. Once we establish the control, please come and do the audit. So that happens. That happens. Dakshesh, how about internal audit of cost reports? I already told that I never come across any instance. Yeah, Anonymous says, is it our ICMI course? Yeah, we have as I said, 4-module course, 50 hours, 3-month duration. Yeah, it's a very good course. I request all of you to join this course. IFC is internal financial control. ICO of our internal control. ICO for internal control over financial reporting. It's mandatory in certain companies. The rules are there. See, Bharat asked, how should a newly qualified CMA develop himself as an internal auditor? A lot of good companies, uh, they take CMAs as an internal auditor because they come up with a different kind of skill set. So I think you should go through this course. It's a 50-hour course, 3 months. It will give a lot of insight and give a lot of, see, once you have this kind of certificate, it gives a lot of confidence. And if you seriously go through the syllabus and the material the institute gives, it gives you a lot of strength, a lot of understanding, a lot of knowledge. And once you have the knowledge and it gives you a lot of confidence, which is required. Internal auditor has to be a very confident person. Anonymous, please share the link to complete 50 hours of internal audit module issued by the ICMA. So I request the ICMF, board members and the committee members to share all the participants the link so that they can join this course. And Vaidya, can CMA in practice get internal audit? What is the scope of CMA? A lot of people do that internal audit. Yeah. Yes, Deep. Hello, sir. What are some of the industry-wide best practices in internal audit function which you have experienced or witnessed firsthand? Best practice, like regarding the compliance audit, the compliance framework, and what I discussed, how to identify the applicable compliances, how to identify compliance officer, compliance owner, chief compliance officer, that entire framework which covers the technology part, how the compliance certificate moves from compliance owner to compliance officer to chief compliance officer. It creates the entire environment. And believe me, means I have seen last 2-3 years that it has a big impact. Once management start receiving this certificate along with the non-compliance or non-compliance, they become aware, and and they start taking seriously. So it's very, very important. Kamlesh says, I have done internal audit of cost records at some companies. There are a lot of benefits of conducting internal audit of cost records. If someone requires help on this topic, yeah, sure, we can discuss that. Yeah, frankly, I never come across anybody, but it's good. Somnath, I said whether these requirements are necessary, even if there is a separate department of internal audit with HOD. Yes, yes. See, you have a separate department in the company, but you have to file if as per the Companies Act, you are required to have an internal auditor. You have to appoint the person in the board through a board resolution, and you have to file MGT 14, which is required. It's a requirement. Yeah, I can share the PPT. Yes. Yeah, that's all, ma'am. Hello. I have taken all the questions. Anything else? Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Actually, we have already crossed our 1 hour timeline.
Sorry.
So no, it's all right, sir. This is a useful and meaningful discussion, and it is a very helpful thing. So I sincerely thank you for providing your time from your busy schedule for this webinar and enriching our members for in such a useful field for them, which can be very useful for them for their professional area. And I would like to thank all the participants who attended and have a patient hearing of so. And I sincerely, I think that this session has enriched all of us. And at the end, I would like to express gratitude from the Board of Advanced Studies and Research to our President, sir, CMA Bibi Nayak, sir, and our Vice President, CMA TCA Prasad, sir, and our Chairman of Board of Advanced Studies and Journal, CMA Vinay Ranjan, sir, for their relentless support to us for organizing such kind of events. And we hope that in future also we will continue in organizing such kind of programs for our members. And sir, thank you once again for your contribution, and we will sincerely look forward for such collaborations in future also. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
And good night to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.